Hi everyone, it's Rax. Path of Exile 2 just launched their big video, their announcement for their early access that starts on December 6th. In my opinion, this is one of the strongest announcements I've ever seen in the history of ARPGs. Any game, and I've been playing them for a long time, since I was like 10 years old. Um, so I thought about a couple of different ways that I could have this conversation with you. And I think actually one of the easiest ways to start off why I think this was so insanely strong is actually by talking about other games that you might be familiar with. So let's start out with Path of Exile 1. Now, some of you may not be familiar with Path of Exile 1. Maybe I'm assuming from my audience, a lot of you are probably Diablo fans, and maybe some of you have never tried it or briefly looked into it and quit. But I want to talk about Path of Exile for a second, and I want to talk about Diablo 4. And specifically, I want to talk about some of the key things that I think don't work with these games and then use that to transition to talk about why I think PoE 2 is going to be so great. By the way, I thought I would show some gameplay or just play the parts of the live stream while I discuss it so you can see all the awesome footage here. I would strongly recommend watching the entire thing, and I'll have a link for it as well. Okay, so back to Path of Exile 1. What doesn't work here? Well, the game is extremely complicated. I have about 1,200 hours in Path of Exile lifetime, and I am still learning new things constantly. At this stage, in almost any other ARPG, I would pretty much consider myself a grandmaster at that point. In PoE, you're just beginning. And I think PoE is complicated and bloated to a fault for new players. Anyone who is a veteran of the game logs in and everything is very easy and it makes sense. And all the thousands of hours that they put into the game really pay off for them because they know so much more than you. They can take advantage of all these things and it makes life very easy. It makes sense. But when you design a product that specifically has a massive barrier to entry, that's pretty bad for anything that you could ever possibly hope to market in any different category. And it's just an intimidation factor, right? How many of you fired up PoE, opened the passive tree, and said, "Yep, nope, I'm out of here"? And while the passive tree is not nearly as bad as it sounds, simultaneously, it's almost impossible to make a really good build on your first try, just randomly throwing stuff together. It's very hard to get it right. And again, you just need a massive amount of knowledge within the game before you can really make it work. So it kind of forces you into following a build guide. These are probably some of the biggest problems with PoE, along with some quality of life stuff that has prevented, I think, a lot of people from jumping in. Let's go to Diablo 4. Diablo 4 has different problems. Diablo 4 has almost no barrier to entry. They're great for casual players. It's not complicated and it's not intimidating at all, which is why Diablo 4 sold so well. The problem is it lacks an end game almost entirely. There truly is nothing to do. Well, I guess that's not literally true. When you get to the end game, there are actually quite a few activities you could do. You can do Helltide or Nightmare Dungeons or the Pit or the Infernal Hordes or the raids or the world bosses. So actually, there are a lot of things to do, but there aren't really any great rewards for doing that. There is nothing to strive for, no super rare items. It's just getting an extra greater affix on the item that already has a greater affix, or getting a slightly higher roll on a legendary aspect, or getting a mythic unique, which is pretty easy now, especially now since the season themes are going to reward sparks. You get a couple of runes from the Kurost Undercity or a couple of boss rotations, do some trading, and then bam, you just craft the one that you need. It is quite possible from a fresh start with absolutely nothing within 24 hours of game time to be in Torment 4, super powerful, probably even with a mythic unique, and done with the entire season. And I can't stress enough, one of the biggest problems for me with Diablo 4 is the rewards for doing it. I have 5100s. I'm Paragon 300. I've killed Uber Lilith a million times. I've killed all of the other pinnacle bosses. I've cleared Pit 150. And what do I have to show for it? I don't have any super awesome mounts. I don't have any titles. My character isn't glowing. I can't link you an item that is so rare and so godly that you wouldn't be able to find it yourself from all the hours that I put into it. The rewards are just not there. So Diablo 4 is suffering in the exact opposite way of there's nothing for the quote unquote blasters to do. So now that we've seen some similar games, some games that Path of Exile 2 might be competing with, and we see this beautiful footage, obviously you can see how much better the engine is already and the graphics. How is PoE 2 going to simultaneously solve the problems of PoE 1 and fix all the problems for Diablo 4 to try to make the best ARPG on the market? Well, first of all, they're just making all of their systems much easier to understand. And if you would like, in a separate video, I can make a, whatever you want to call it, an everything I know about Path of Exile 2, where I start to explain all of this to you. But right here, for example, in this footage, do you see on the right here, or maybe my webcam is blocking it, but they have 1 health flask and they have 1 mana flask. Let me go in here and let me see if I can hide my, yeah, you see right here? The 1 health flask and the 1 mana flask. That's because there's only 2 flasks. And this is a big improvement from the piano tiles that you were playing in Path of Exile that you pretty much could never get away from. Even though you have an opportunity to automate your flasks in the end game, it's actually better if you don't do that, because then you can craft them to be super powerful if you manually press them and a bunch of different things. And instead, in order to get all of the extra powers, they have a system, I believe, that's called charms. And you'll just craft the charms. It's going to help you if you need immunity to freeze or immunity to shock or any of those kinds of things. It's going to solve it that way. Essentially, they're assigning you only 2 buttons, life and resource. And of course, you can solve it with the tree or with different progression systems. And then they're just going to automate the other stuff for you and not give you some kind of advantage for doing it manually. This is going to help the new players a lot. The gem system is a lot easier, and I assume also the stat system and the leveling system. I can't tell you how many times I've had new players tell me that they're leveling up, but then they get a new item and the colors aren't right, the links aren't right. Oh, they switched 1 item and they lost 10 strength, and now they leveled up their gem too much, and now they can't put in their gem, and they don't know how to fix it, and they're confused, and their guide doesn't cover it, and they're already lost because they can't do it themselves. And if the guide doesn't have every little answer for them in the world, then they're doomed. It's things like that. So then they get frustrated and then they quit. By simplifying all of these processes, where you just have an uncut skill gem, you assign it to a skill, and then you just throw the support gems in there, it's going to make it a million times easier. Then they have another system, which I think is extremely smart for PoE, called the recommended builds. So when you go in there and you start putting in some skill gems, they had a function in there called recommended, like support gems, where it hides, the hundreds and hundreds of support gems that you could put in there. If you enable an option, it'll recommend them to you. And a lot of grinding, here's the interface right here, by the way. That's perfect to see. So this is perfect for new players, and I haven't actually played the game yet, but it seemed like they picked very intelligent support gems. And a lot of grinding gear games, the people who design this, probably play these games quite a bit. I know some of the people on grinding gear games go for rank 1 on the ladder within the game itself, which is probably why they seem to be so in tune with their community all the time. They know their game inside and out. So, and then of course, there will be Maxwell guides for you as well if you want to use that, or I don't know, maybe even grinding gear games and Maxwell will partner up for the recommended builds feature. Would love that as well. Either way, it's a function within the game. So if you're intimidated by it, don't be. There's recommended builds, and I'm sure they will be good. Another thing that they're doing in order to make builds much more viable is the way that they have structured their passive tree The way that they have explained it is all of the nodes are going to be really good for your class. So let's say you path in a very, let's say, suboptimal way for your build. The damage that that's going to cause to your overall character is going to be far less than what it was in PoE 1. To say that a different way, in PoE 1, if you made a mistake or multiple mistakes, you're screwed and it's over. PoE 2, it really won't be that way. You can path, let's say, the wrong way, and it'll still be pretty strong. This is very smart. Other things, they have made the crafting a lot easier, and they want you to craft a lot more often. No more porting to town, walking to your crafting bench, and then doing stuff and having the items bricked, and you don't know how to fix it, and you don't have any currency, and you're mad. The currency drops much more often. You can craft on the fly right away and start manipulating your gear. And there are a lot more opportunities when you have a good base, even if you have bricked it, to not have it completely bricked and try to save it. So pretty much you're going to be getting so much currency, you're going to be encouraged to get in there and start manipulating your gear. And of course, with everything here, they're showing you all the support gems there, and they're showing that thing that I was explaining about the recommended stuff. So the crafting is going to be easier. It's going to be a major part of the game. And then we look at the development of the game, and I think this is probably the smartest thing that I've seen. So it's not just Diablo 4. This is a common problem in ARPGs. Every ARPG can launch with a very nice campaign. I like Diablo 4's campaign. I like Diablo 3's campaign. I like Path of Exile's campaign. I like Last Epoch's campaign. It's fine. I like them. But really what it comes down to, at least for me, not everybody, is the ARPGs are about the repetitive part, right? This is a seasonal game that I play over and over and over and over and over. A nice campaign does matter. It is important. But what I want to know is, what am I going to be doing all the time? What am I going to do after the campaign? In this genre of a game, that is more important to me than the story. I'm looking for a story. I'll play a role-playing game like Final Fantasy VII or like Baldur's Gate 3, where the story and what's going on is more important to me than me endlessly blasting the game over and over and over. Grinding Gear Games made a decision in this early access, and they said, you want to know what? We're going to stop work on the campaign. We've got the first 3 acts done. They're really polished. We have 3 more acts to build. For the early access that's starting on December 6th, we're going to skip the last 3 acts while we work on them. We're going to have our developers work on the end game so we can release that to you. So on December 6th, we have the first 3 acts, and I'm assuming pretty much the entire end game, which is colossal in typical Grinding Gear Games fashion. And I just can't explain to you how much I appreciate that and how smart that is. Because I want to know, what am I going to be doing all the time in the game? And I think it's such a great strategy. So going through, and we talked about how massive the game is going to be. Well, you can see the passive tree is massive again. But again, remember, pathing wherever you want is way less punishing than a PoE 1. So if you don't want to follow a build guide, just go anywhere that you want and mess around with it. On the launch of the game, there's going to be 12 classes who ascend into 36 different masteries. So you start out as a sorcerer, and then you might ascend into a warlock or a spellbinder or a chronomancer or something. I'm just making up names. I don't know all of them. In the early access, we have access to 6 of the classes, each with 2 of their masteries. So we'll have 12 to play in early access. There will be 36 on the launch of the game, which they said would be within a year of when they launch the early access. So Path of Exile will release in full in 2025. I think they said, if I'm quoting them correctly, it would take a minimum of 6 months, but not longer than a year. So mid to late 2025 is when the full game will be out. Then the end game currently already sounds bigger than every single other game except Path of Exile 1. What they have done is they have taken, I believe, 5 of the very popular League mechanics that people liked, and they didn't just port them directly over into Path of Exile 2, they redid them and they made them better. So we already will have 5 revamped, well polished League mechanics in the endgame. And then in PoE 1, they had this like 126 map, gotta catch 'em all system. And in PoE 2, as I understand it, they have a gigantic world. And I believe they said it's infinite that you just traverse through that has tons of secrets and different ways that you can path. And should be incredible because you can never run out of content. There are lots of little other things to chase within this world. And instead of just standing in a hideout and going through a 126 point chart, you're actually going to be immersed in a world that you're traversing through that you can pick any way that you want to look for special items or special encounters within those maps, which is going to be a lot to explain. I'll have to explain it probably in a different video. Then all of the different trials that you have within the campaign to actually do your ascension also have end game versions that you can go through. And then the end game atlas tree seems to be separated into different trees based upon which end game that you would like to do. If you're familiar with Diablo 4, it would be like, oh, you had a tree for Helltide if you want to put your points into buffing Helltide. Or you have a tree for Nightmare Dungeons. That's what you like to run, then you would put your points into that. So they separate it, which actually should be a hell of a lot easier for people. Because what they had before was a gigantic, massive tree and 1,000 points with all of the League mechanics that you had to kind of navigate through and spec into. Now they just separated them into different trees. And I believe then they have their general tree and also a pinnacle bossing tree, which of course they said the pinnacle bosses will be there. And they said that the final pinnacle bosses will be incredibly challenging, which not only should be an exciting goal for you and I to try to beat, but it would be so exciting to watch the Path of Exile 2 races in hardcore, especially since the difficulty is going to be a little bit higher, to watch people try to race through and beat these bosses with absolutely nothing. Then, another very smart idea they have done is they have made the Path of Exile endgame in a lot of ways choose your difficulty. So in Diablo 4, how would you choose your difficulty? You literally pick Torment 1, Torment 2, Torment 3, Torment 4, and then you go play. In Path of Exile 2, within your tree, you can choose to add difficulty as you get the points into the mechanics. You put more points in the mechanics, it gets harder, you get much better rewards. So that might open up brand new uniques that you could find, or just higher quality of gear, or it might actually change the boss mechanics. It could be all of the above. But there is a way to kind of choose your own difficulty. So if you're struggling with the first level of it, you don't put points into leveling up its difficulty until you're comfortable. Again, a very smart idea from the team. And again, they're bringing in some things from Path of Exile 1 that they have already solved in terms of quality of life. They have an in-game marketplace. I used it all last season. It works fantastic. People have been begging for it in Diablo 4. We don't have it. They have it in Path of Exile. Works perfectly. And then, of course, a lot of the other changes like gold being a primary resource and gold not being tradable. I think this is so smart. The full game is tradable. All items, all currencies, but not gold. And the reason why is gold is your basic currency to kind of engage with your character, to do your respecs and things like that. If gold was fully tradable, it would just trivialize the game. Again, by not making it tradable, they make you, at least somewhat, play the game and be rewarded for it. Because earning the gold will allow you to do whatever you want, which is the whole point of these kinds of games. And I don't know, there's just so many things here that are working very well. that combined with this beautiful gameplay and all of the different uh, things that they built in. Let me comment on one more thing. You might have seen this earlier. A lot of the skills, first of all, the support gems pretty much work in any active skill gem. So the combinations there should be insane. But it's not just that all the support gems work, it's also that certain abilities work with other abilities. So, for example, if you're a mage and you lay a firewall, and then someone shoots like lightning through a firewall, then it turns into this like forked lightning flame stuff that fills up the entire screen and just crushes everything. Seeing those interactions, especially with the upgraded engine and the graphics, it looks insane and it feels so good to look for those kinds of combinations. And one more thing that I want to say, if you compare some of the recent Diablo 4 changes to, if you watch this entire thing, the PoE 2 announcement, and you listen to them explain how their progression systems work, an example of a an example of a Diablo 4 upgrade is 30% damage. You get this legendary power, it gives you 30% more damage. And an example of a Path of Exile buff is now you shoot 2 extra projectiles. And the difference here is when Path of Exile is stacking hundreds and hundreds of different ways that change your character, more projectiles, more radius, more armor, this or that, or this or that, versus 20% damage, 10% attack speed in Diablo. The ones from Diablo are only noticeable in the sense that the number goes up. But in Path of Exile's progression systems, your character changes. The things that you shoot out change. They do different elements. There's a different number of them. They bounce off of terrain when they didn't before. They interact with a firewall when they didn't before. It actually changes your gameplay from when you start the campaign as a shitty ranger with a bow that doesn't do anything to the end game where you're blinking around, AoE deleting 1,000 monsters in 2 seconds. And that progression that you feel feels so much more rewarding. So the main point of this video that I was trying to get across is I absolutely love a lot of the decisions that Grinding Gear Games does. And I listened to the multiple hour Q&A with the game directors afterward. And I thought, again, their description of the problems, along with their thought process on why they were solving the problems, was pretty much spot on across the board. And I've learned today that they share a lot of the same design philosophies that I would implement if I ever made a game. I'm genuinely impressed by what they have done, and I would really like to continue to support them. So I'm going to do that in several ways. First of all, I'm going to play their game. Second of all, I'm making this video. Third of all, what I'm going to do, and I should explain this to you, they have at pathofexile.com/purchase, and it might be different for console. You might log on console. If you want to gain access to their early access that starts on December 30th, you have 2 choices. You could either buy any of these supporter packs, or if you have, I believe the number is $480 lifetime spend in PoE 1, you don't have to buy any of these. So I don't have to buy any of these. I already have spent more than $480 in PoE 1. But you want to know what I'm going to do right after this video ends? I'm going to buy this supporter pack. I'm going to buy the most expensive one because I want to give Grinding Gear Games $480 more to keep making games. I can tell with the amount of massive investment and the years of work into this game that the money that they have been making has went into making more games. So if you're telling me if I keep giving you money, if you're going to keep making great games, I will continue to do that. So I'll buy this. And by the way, Grinding Gear Games didn't tell me to make this video. This video is not sponsored. I just made this video just because. We just keep making great games. Thank you. I really appreciate it. So that's where you can gain access on December 6th. Again, early access is going to be between 6 and 12 months. If you want to wait, you can, no problem. Path of Exile will be free then. But if you want to support them, there are the packs. I'll buy the $480 one right after this video ends. I mean, that's about it, guys. So one more thing. I've been asked a lot. There were several thousand of you watching the announcement with me on stream. I appreciate that very much. And I kept hearing people spam Diablo 4 bad. This killed Diablo. Rax is never going to play Diablo after this. Rip Diablo, da 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 da. To address that very quickly, I will still play Diablo 4. I'll still be there on all the launches, all the important events. I'll still make build guides. I'll still make the tier list. I'll still make the leveling guides. I'll still be there. This game seems much more like a game that was designed for me. I like to play games degenerately for hours and hours and hours, even if I wasn't a streamer. That's just how I like to play. It's one of my favorite hobbies. So this game seems like, with the vast amount of endgame and with essentially 36 different classes to play between the masteries, it seems like there's thousands and thousands and thousands of hours you can sink into a game like this in order to get a lot out of it. Because of that, I have a very favorable opinion for a game I haven't even played yet, but I will probably make a full suite of guides: the beginner's guide, the trading guide, the gearing up guide, the crafting guide, millions of build guides, how to beat every boss, how to do these league mechanics, everything you could ever imagine, anything that you want. Leave me a comment. I'll make those videos for you. And just like always, I'm going to make it real simple on you. Real easy. And then we can get into the more advanced stuff later on. I've never played the game, so I'm going to need to play the game for a bit, but I plan on being a very consistent, solid content creator for this game, hopefully for a long time. One final comment that I will make is, if you've ever watched me play Path of Exile 1, again, I have about 1,200 hours in the game. I would say I know enough to be dangerous. Like, I know enough how to make the beginner. I've made some beginner's guides and some build guides. People have really liked them. But it will be completely different in Path of Exile 2. I will be a super grandmaster of this game because I will spend the time learning. I will be a scholar and a student of the game until I understand. I don't think anyone will ever understand everything, but I'll understand most of it. I'm not going to be the one asking the questions. I'm going to be the one answering the questions. So that's what you can expect out of me. I can almost guarantee it with 99% certainty. I'm looking forward to the races and the events. I'll play on hardcore. I'll play on softcore. I'll play all the classes, all the masteries. I want to be a god of this game, and I'm stubborn. Whenever I want to do something, I usually get it done. So that's what we're gonna do. Anyway, this video is pretty long. If you would like me to make another video about everything that I know about Path of Exile 2, more specifically, and getting into more detail, I can. Let me know. I don't know as much as some of the other content creators that have actually played the game, but I'm really looking forward to it. So supporter packs are on pathofexile.com. Support them if you like what they're doing. And if you've never played Path of Exile before, or you were intimidated by PoE 1, I would strongly encourage you to try this. I think it is a very strong chance that this might be the best ARPG ever made. It's possible. Thank you so much, guys, and a lot more content is coming. Thank you.